Would you pray with me? And now, Lord God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. In Jesus' name, amen. When my oldest daughter, Maddie, was 13 years old, she broke her collarbone body surfing at Oak Island. We rushed her to what passed for an urgent care center there close to the island, and they took an x-ray, and they explained that her collarbone was broken. And in the x-ray, things looked pretty bad. There wasn't just like a simple, break. It was catty-cornered, one piece going this way and one piece crossing, facing the wrong direction. And so we asked, well, what will happen next? What will we do? What kind of an apparatus is going to make this collarbone whole again, make it back in one line is what we wanted, one line of collarbone. And they said, well, nothing really. I'm sorry, what? They said, we'll give her a brace to keep her arm still, but basically it's just going to grow back together. Grow back together. It's not even facing the same direction. How is it going to grow back together? And they didn't shrug, but they did say, it just will. So we brought her home in a very uncomfortable sling, which put a curb on her beach fund for the rest of the week, and we vowed that when we got back to civilization, we were going to take her to a real orthopedic doctor. And guess what the real orthopedic doctor said when we took her? It'll grow back together. What? How will it grow back together? And she said, it just will. Okay. After a year, there was a lump right where the break had been, and we both, Monty and I both, we just kind of snarled, yeah, it grew back together, and now she's going to have that lump. Thanks a lot, orthopedic doctor. And after 2 years, the lump subsided. And 13 years later, there is no visible indication that she ever broke her collarbone. It healed itself, all on its own. Arguably, you could say that the book of Luke is a book about healing. Although all the Gospels tell stories of Jesus the healer, the book of Luke tells the widest variety of stories. Stories where individuals are healed because they asked for healing, where they are healed because someone else asked on their behalf, where they're healed because they touch Jesus and take the healing without his volition. People are healed of blindness, of leprosy, of bleeding, of disease, of injury, of disability, of mental illness, of demon possession, even of death. And it's not just individuals who are healed. Relationships are healed. Communities are healed. And people leave Jesus' side and go back to the place where they were known as broken to show everyone how they have been healed. Consider this story of the demon-possessed man of Gerasenes. When Jesus comes across him, he is chained, naked, outside of the tombs with guards around him. We hear that from time to time. He breaks the chains and runs into the wilderness, wreaking havoc wherever he goes. What does the fact that the man is chained far away from town, out by the graveyard, as a matter of fact, what does that suggest to you? Do we think he chained himself there? Do we think that he's the one who decided, I really need to be in a separate place? He has people guarding him. People from the community are standing guard. What's happening in this community? What is the story of this man's interaction with the community? Think of what has preceded this moment when Jesus appeared. This community has been dealing with this man for a long, long time. He's probably hurt people. He's definitely really scared them. His family has grieved for him. They lost his income, his contribution to the family, his personality, his love, his care. This is a beautiful story of healing, where a man who is completely lost to himself and to everyone around him is restored to himself. Jesus sends the demons into the pigs, and the result of the banishment of the spirits harming the man and his return to sanity is that the people who witness it are afraid, and they send Jesus away. The gospel writer of Luke uses several different words in his writing, which are translated, all of them translated into English as either healed or restored. The word in that chapter 4 uses is therapeu, the word from which we get the word therapy. And it can mean to serve, as in the actions of a servant, or it can mean to restore to health. Another word used in this chapter is aiomai, which means to make whole or to make free from errors. The third word I'm going to struggle more with, apokthystemai, which means to restore to its former state. And the last one I found was sozo, which means to ease the suffering of something, or it can mean to save, even the sense of salvation in the spiritual sense. What we witness Jesus doing in these stories is offering his services over and over. Where there has been health before, he brings restoration of health. Where things have been broken or pulled apart, he brings wholeness. Where things have been lost, he finds them and he brings them back. He saves them. I know that when we, as people living in the 21st century, hear stories about healing, we come to them with a little bit of skepticism. We hear a story about demons flying out of a man and into a herd of pigs, and some of us might think, only to ourselves now, not out loud, probably not. Probably just a story. Maybe Jesus helped him. Maybe he listened to him. Maybe that's what happened. We hear the story about the woman who touched Jesus, and the power that poured out of him through the hem of his robe healed her of disease that she had had for 20 years. And some of us might think, probably not. Probably just the adrenaline of that moment. How can we believe these events happened as they were written? What would that mean? We grew up in a world where faith healers to a person were charlatans. They were cheaters and thieves, people who took advantage of the suffering of others in order to make a buck. The churches that I've been in, I don't hear people talking very much about how God has healed them. Healing is something that comes through the hands of skilled practitioners, doctors, and nurses, for those whose skill God could be thanked, but whose work can be explained by science. We might expect a cure for a disease, a treatment or a therapy, a surgery to correct or make a problem whole. But we neither ask for nor expect healing except that which can be explained by science. What happens when we do not expect to be healed? When we reject the wholeness offered by God because we do not believe in miracles? How do we reconcile our need for things to be logical, for things to fit into our scientific view of the world with the stories of Jesus? More than half of the Gospels are about Jesus' acts of healing, and it appears to me that it is his healing that is his appeal. I mean, some people will show up for a sermon, but he gets crowds in the thousands. No one is that good of a speaker. For most of us, I think, we put those stories in some kind of special category. At best, these are things of the first century or specific to Jesus. They do not touch me at all. And we have some rough experience, I admit. Many of us have stood by a hospital bed and prayed with all our might. Many of us have been in the Garden of Gethsemane begging for a cup to be removed from us, only to find that it has not. We have known real sorrow and real grief. And we know the tricks that happen behind the curtain, and we refuse to be taken in by charlatans. No one is going to take advantage of us and make us look foolish. I think it hardens us. We hunker down inside of our suffering, and we learn to pretend that nothing is wrong, that we are fine, and no healing is required. Some of you may be familiar with the scene in the classic movie, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where King Arthur rides up with Patsy, his trusted servant, to the crossroads where the Black Knight is on guard. And when the Black Knight refuses him passage, Arthur joins him in battle and cuts his arm off. And instead of conceding that he has lost, the Black Knight refuses to acknowledge that he is wounded. Arthur says, "Your arm's off." And the Black Knight said, "No, it isn't. 'Tis but a scratch." The scene ends with the Black Knight on the ground, an armless, legless stump twisting back and forth as Arthur rides by. And as Arthur is passing by him in triumph, the Black Knight says, "All right, we'll call it a draw." What I see in myself and in the people I live with and in the culture around me is that same basic approach to life. Maybe if I pretend that my arm didn't fall off, I can power through and I can still win this thing. Maybe if I'm very quiet, this brokenness will pass. We are, as a people, very hard on ourselves, expecting ourselves to hold up under enormous stress, enormous responsibility, and enormous pain. What would it look like if we allowed ourselves to acknowledge our suffering and genuinely sought to be healed by God? Because we are in a battle for our lives every single day. Every day, our bodies are fighting off colds and infections and even cancer. Every day, we are dodging injury and mayhem as we careen around the world in our aluminum rockets on wheels. It is no wonder that we are tired all the time. And we are raised in a culture that has demanded that we be responsible for every single little thing around us. We've been made to believe that we are in control, that when our arms fall off, we should power through, that's the way, the forward way is never wrong, is to pretend something that is that the way forward is simply to pretend that nothing is wrong. Never show weakness. We're taught to silence our needs, not to mention our desires. I want you to picture something right now. Here is a crowd of people, and in the center is Jesus. I have heard of this Jesus. He has a reputation as a healer. And I have been depressed for a long, long time. I have tried everything. I work hard. I do my duties. But I can't shake my sense of despair and loneliness. And there is Jesus. He is standing right there. And I never move to touch him because it's not like depression is cancer, right? Why should I get healed? So many people are worse off than I am. And what if Jesus turns and looks at me? He says, "Woman, what is wrong with you?" And I say, "Not a thing, Lord. I am fine." He says, "You know that I'm a healer, right?" And I say, "Yes, Lord, these people over here, they need you so badly." And he says, but you do not." And I say, "No, Lord, I am fine." And he says, "Last chance, I have to go." And I say, "You go on, Lord. You have more important things to do than standing around here talking to me." Do you know, from what I know of Jesus, that encounter with me might just make him madder than seeing a Pharisee with 12 gold rings sitting on top of 3 ugly widows and a dog. To have access to the God of all the universe and to reject it. For what? I have to tell you, I have come to see this tendency in myself as the ultimate arrogance. "No, God, I won't bother you with all your access to the power that runs the universe, I, Martha of Lynchburg, will solve all of my own problems. I will heal myself with this packet of vitamin C powder and a YouTube video about yoga. There it is, done. I think sometimes we mistake healing for magic. And in our defense, in our stories, it is hard to tell the difference. Power flowing through someone's robe certainly sounds like magic. But I would distinguish magic from miracle. And miracles happen all the time. Our world is filled with miracles. Whole forests of trees who talk to each other through their roots. Coral reefs which fight their way back to health. Children who bring us gifts. Relationships which get reconciled. Jesus says it best. You can plant the seeds, he says. Can any of you make them grow? The world is miraculous. That is its nature. That is how it works. When I pray for healing, I try to be very clear what I am doing. I believe we have been instructed to ask for healing, to pressure God for it, to beg for it. We are told to seek wholeness and restoration, and we are told to do this in no uncertain terms. This is what we should be doing. The first thing then is that we must acknowledge the ways we are broken, the diseases with which we struggle, and the injuries we have sustained. We have to look down at that arm lying there on the ground, see it and say, well, that's not ideal. Hey God, can you help me with that? And then here is the tricky part, and we have no control over what happens next. Two things can be broken in half and wonky in their position, facing the completely opposite directions. And we say, God, please heal this broken thing, and all we can do is wait. But here's the beauty part. There is always healing. Always. Because we are having a human experience for which there is only one cure. To finish up the human experience. I don't pretend to know the purpose behind our human experience. I have my guesses, but I think it is something we might have to each find out on our own. But I do not believe that death is our enemy. Clearly, it's not something we should long for or rush toward. Jesus brings people back from death many times. Those who are on the brink are restored. Those who have passed on are brought back. I want to be clear that I do not see our life of faith as one where all we have to hope for is that someday we'll die. But I would say that our resurrection faith teaches us that death is not something to be feared. I think of it like a graduation. It's going to be different from now on. That life I was living has ended, but this new life ahead of me is going to be pretty great. And I don't want to be glib about injury and disease. I have enough scars to know what it means to carry them. We are injured by our lives. We are pummeled by our experiences. And healing is not magic. It does not make things disappear. Healing is wholeness, a broken thing made whole. Wholeness includes our scars, but our scars can be a grace to others. Oh, you've been through this too. I've seen the faces of those who bear the same scars that I do, and there is great comfort there. We walk through fire together. We are tempered together. After we fought off chicken pox, we're stronger. Our bodies check that off the list. Look, we say, here is the scar where I flipped my bike over. Our scars become our stories. They are the human experience, and they bind us to each other in powerful ways. My friend Susan sent me a definition this week that I think that gets at the heart of healing, at least as it is presented in our text. She said that a synonym for healing would be sound, as in safe and sound. In that context, sound has the connotation of wholeness, of restoration, but it also has the connotation of usefulness. If a horse is sound, a horse can be ridden. That horse can do his work. He is strong and he can bear weight. The wholeness we're called to requires us to address our diseases and our injuries, to acknowledge them and to ask for healing because we have things to do. One of the words for healing in Greek is the same as that which is used for servants. In our human experience, we have work to do, weight to bear, which we cannot take if we are not sound. The joy of community is that inside this community, we're able to share our true illnesses, our true sorrows, our true brokenness. We're invited to share this here in a place of safety where no one will say, "Can you believe she's like that?" We live together, seeing each other with gentle eyes, knowing that each person we look at has his or her own brokenness, that everyone we see is fighting for their lives. And we have one thing to offer. You should go see Jesus. He'll get right on that. Amen.